Seamus Fisher stood at the dilapidated theater's entrance, his hook hand gesturing to the dimly lit foyer. The air reeked of decay and rot. Cobwebs clung to chandeliers like macabre bridal veils. Beyond the foyer, a faded marquee creaked in the wind of the Ressurectionist review where death meets art. Seamus's eyes gleamed with morbid excitement. Tonight was the night he unveiled his latest creation, puppeteered played victims. He'd chosen 6 recently deceased souls for their perfect, vacant expressions and pliable limbs. Their bodies lay motionless on stage, strings attached to their limbs waiting for Seamus's delicate touch. The audience trickled in, a mix of curiosity seekers and die-hard Ressurectionist fans. They took their seats amidst the musty scent of aged velvet and rusting metal. A lone spotlight cast an otherworldly glow on the stage as Seamus began his show. With each tug on the strings, the plagued victims twitched to life. Their limbs jerked in jerky motions, like marionettes controlled by a masterful puppeteer. The audience gasped in awe, enthralled by this macabre ballet of death and decay. The victims danced to Seamus's cues, their movements becoming more fluid with each passing moment. The first few rows were transfixed, mesmerized by the spectacle unfolding before them. However, as the show progressed, a creeping sense of unease began to spread through the audience. Some patrons exchanged uneasy glances, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Seamus's fingers danced across the strings, orchestrating a gruesome pass-to-do between 2 victims. Their limbs tangled in a grotesque knot, as if attempting to strangle each other. The audience gasped again, this time with a mix of horror and morbid fascination. The strings began to vibrate with an eerie energy, like a harp being plucked by unseen fingers. Seamus's eyes locked onto the audience, his pupils dilating with maniacal intensity. As he continued to manipulate the puppets, the audience's unease turned to panic. Some patrons screamed, covering their faces as the marionette's limbs flailed wildly. Others stared on, transfixed by the spectacle of death and decay. And then it happened. A single string snapped. The audience gasped in unison as one of the puppets suddenly lurched forward, its arm flailing wildly towards a patron in the front row. The individual tried to scramble out of the way, but it was too late. The puppet's hand closed around their wrist like a vice, the fingers digging deep into the flesh. The audience erupted into chaos as patrons scrambled to escape, but Seamus stood firm, his eyes blazing with an unholy energy. He manipulated the strings with renewed vigor, orchestrating a grotesque ballet of self-inflicted wounds among the panicking crowd. Cuts and gashes appeared on the audience members' arms and faces as they desperately tried to cut themselves free from the puppet's grasp. The sound of screams and shattering glass filled the air as the patrons fought for their lives. Seamus laughed maniacally, his hook hand waving above the chaos like a conductor's baton. He was the maestro, orchestrating this macabre symphony of death and decay. But there were still a few individuals who clung to their seats, transfixed by the spectacle unfolding before them. They watched in morbid fascination as Seamus continued to puppeteer the audience into a grotesque ballet of self-inflicted wounds. The puppets danced on, their limbs jerking in time with the string's eerie energy. The audience members' screams grew louder, more desperate, but they remained transfixed by the spectacle. And then it was over. Seamus dropped his hands to his sides, a satisfied smile spreading across his face. The audience lay motionless, some of them twitching as if still under Seamus's control. But there were a few who refused to join in the encore. A lone patron sat frozen in her seat, her eyes wide with terror as she stared at the puppets' lifeless bodies on stage. Another individual stood, his face white-knuckled as he backed away from the stage, but Seamus's eyes locked onto him and he froze, transfixed by the puppeteer's malevolent gaze. Only one person managed to escape the theater unscathed, a young woman who had arrived late and taken her seat in the back. She stumbled out into the night air, gasping for breath as she tried to process what she had just witnessed. Seamus watched her go, his smile growing wider with each step. He knew that he would have to add this new individual to his collection of plague victims, but for now, he was content to savor the memory of his latest creation, a macabre ballet of death and decay, orchestrated by his own unholy hands. As the night wore on, the theatre's doors creaked open once more. Seamus stepped out into the darkness, his hook hand gesturing towards the derelict building behind him. The Ressurectionist review would continue, with a new cast of puppets and a fresh audience eager to witness the horrors that lay within.